Boom. Rob, Robert, um, Robert Braxton.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, very good. We just had a chat with you, and I pressed the button. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. We're still good old friends. Known each other for a while now. Um, well, welcome to the show. I don't
Thank you.
know. I don't know the name of the show yet. Actually, right now I call it Job Search Podcast because it's about
Yep,
jobs, like a
yep.
professional development.
Mm,
Search is because it's like search, search. Every time somebody says search, like
yes,
Google search, I
yep.
twist my neck because I hear my name. So maybe it will be called Job Search
Yeah,
Podcast. Maybe not. But welcome, whatever it will be called. Welcome. You're you're the episode number 2, guest number 2. Thanks for doing it again. And yeah, let's just chat. Yeah.
yeah,
Who are you?
absolutely.
What do you do?
So I look at myself as now probably a bit of a veteran in the workplace, simply because of the time that I've been now working for. You know, it's over 40 years now, and it's pretty. It's
Mm,
been fun. I enjoy work and picking up different projects, different ways of doing things, and love to learn. And I tend to jump in the deep end more often than not, and because you gain those experiences and you meet lots of people along the way. And so I look at myself as these days a IT or business professional looking for new ways and new opportunities to work with people. It's as pretty much as simple as
mhm,
that.
mhm.
Along the way and help people. I mean, and that's the key is that it can't be all about
Interesting.
yourself, you know?
I think with age, you get wiser, yeah, and you
Yep.
just the way you talk about it, like you focusing on people, helping people, like so for you doesn't matter like even which industry, what title, just let me work in like with good people where I can be helpful. Yeah, is that
Yeah,
summary?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That'd be the
Mm.
this, so you can then because if you can help people, in return, they will help you. And
Yep.
usually you don't have to prompt that. You don't have to
Mm.
call for it. It will
Mm.
happen. And might not be
Yeah,
today, might be in
I think.
6 time. And it's the old story of swings and roundabouts. But
Sorry, say it again. You got cut out a little bit. What did you say? You've been what?
so if you help people, what you'll tend to find is at
Yeah,
some stage in your life they will help you, and it may not be that person in
yeah,
particular, maybe someone they know down the
yeah.
track,
Okay.
and that's to me
Mhm.
the focus is how can you help
So
others.
karma works in professional setting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's what I
Really?
yeah
Yeah, because but I think it's essentially because like when you started talking, like straight away, I kind of like, oh wow, 40 years in the industry, whatever it is, yeah, in the
Mm,
workforce, yeah,
yeah
and I'm 20, so I'm kind of halfway through your
yeah
journey, yeah,
yeah
and I
yeah
think you will be maybe inspiration for me or like an insight into what's ahead, and how to go down this path because like when people I guess are younger, they have this cutthroat mentality. They think
yes
like as the game is like with the like how do they say like a one sum game, yeah. So
yeah
if you gain more, like you you take more share of the pie from others. If
yeah
they take more, then there's left less for you. So I
yeah
think maybe when you get to your age, like you already passed that, like so you're not looking to kind of be ambitious, or uh, go over people, progressing some or anything like that.
mm.
But actually, that's a fair question. Were you like this before? Maybe in your
I,
early days
I
or
was never I
midway
was
through your career, were you
never
ever cut throat?
no, I was never climb over the top of people. I was ambitious, wanting to climb the ladder always, um, and if you once you get back into the organisation, you are looking at naturally ways to climb the ladder. It's just I think there's ways to do that without the old school of stomping on people's heads. Um, to me, if you work with people and try and build solutions that create great outcomes, everything falls into place and comes that way. Whether you get the promotion, don't get the promotion, I never worried too much about that. At the end of the day, money came into it
No,
for
no,
sure.
ah,
Mm, so
okay, so you never worried about. No,
no,
but you were ambitious before, right? But how hardcore ambitious were you? Like, did you ever? Do you remember any situation where you like underseat somewhere, or you kind of, let's say you would speak up for a person, defend someone or something like this, but you didn't, and the person get fired, and you took his place, something like that. Like, was there a story like that, which you
no,
regret maybe?
no. I've never. I've been lucky in some ways. I've never been in that situation. I've been in situations where, um, so I can like an example. We had about 20 years ago now, and our organisation was collapsing because it just didn't have the funding to go to the next step, and
Mhm,
the deals that were going to come off didn't. And there was definitely executives at that time who definitely swore to secrecy amongst themselves and actually wouldn't tell anybody what was going to happen. And I
mhm.
was in middle management at that time, middle to senior, and I'm always pretty outspoken, and I always looked at the people that I worked with or for me in that space. What one manager in the past or CEO in the past in some small organisations I worked with described me more of a shop steward um, mentality than climb over the top of people.
As what? Sorry, say it again.
More of a shop steward
Shop
mentality.
steward.
Shop steward.
What's that? I'm just not familiar.
Basically, I tend to be the type of person that looks after other members of the team and will speak out for the other members of the team, uh, which I did a lot in
Yeah.
that organisation and made sure people got looked after, made sure they got a reasonable salary that they should be getting, and making sure their work conditions also
Mhm.
were well looked after in that space. And I tend to look after the other people around me before myself. That's just um, instinctive to me.
Are you
Um,
Christian? Are you Christian? Are you Christian?
I was baptized Christian, but I'm not really um, a religious person. I do believe in the spiritual side of life, for sure.
Yeah.
I do believe there's
Did you
more.
go to church when you were young?
No, no. We never. My family never went to church.
Hmm.
Hardly. Well, the only time we went to church
So
was
family were not
yeah,
really.
weddings, funerals, christenings. That's
Yeah.
where we went. They're the
Yeah.
church
Okay.
we went to. Um,
But where do you think your generosity, like altruistic, this side of you in professional life, where is it rooted in? Like, is it just like
I think
the
it's
upbringing?
yeah, it's definitely upbringing because I was always well, I was brought up not to be selfish, and not to think of yourself
Yeah.
first. Think of others,
Hmm.
and there's always somebody
Yeah.
worse off than you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 That's
So
very Australian. Think.
yeah, so that's just the mindset, and I carried that through life and workplace as
Yeah. Yeah.
well. So it's probably built into my natural core. So I tend and I
That's
always
cool.
say that I don't believe throwing people under the bus. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's no doubts I was a bit more.
So do you think? But now, wait. But now, retrospectively, do you
Mm,
think it served you a good cause? Like, do you feel like you benefited from this attitude, or you missed out on some things? Like, do you envy some people that, let's say, sometimes I would just look at the people who I worked with previously, and then their career just went just. skyrocketed, and I'm just kind of was stagnating. And I was like, what was in those people that I was lacking? Like, and maybe those people were in my view, like they were less knowledgeable than I was, but they
Mm.
were more like on a political side of things, and like sucking up to the boss and stuff like that. So I kind of envied them, and it's like I
Yeah,
felt at the same time I kind of felt that like I don't want to be that kind of person, but at the same time, oh shit, but I never progressed anywhere. So I kind of like, so
I
my
think
life
yeah,
sucks compared to them
yeah,
maybe.
yeah. I think at the end of the day, you've got to do things that sit well self, right? So yeah, I mean, some like guys that I'm good friends with now, they got promoted to VP level or CTO level. I mean, I got
Yep.
to a reasonable level. I mean, I got to director level where I was at Black Hawk Network
Mhm.
of all of Asia Pac. We helped set up all of Asia Pac. I was earning over 200,000 a year in my last year there.
Mhm.
But the simple crunch comes down to um,
Mhm.
organizations have to make decisions on what they think is the right fit at the time, and they're making a decision in anything between 5 minutes to 6 months. So that's really a lot of it that comes down to, and then it depends on the strategy of internal versus external in that space. And I'm a true believer that most of the time, like 90% of the time, the decisions aren't personal. But if you're on the other end of the spectrum, well, then it is personal, right? So that's the crunch, I think, in the workplace.
Yep.
Workplace, unfortunately, is a bottom line workplace. What is the bottom line that it's going to cost? So if you're and it's typically the middle management. Your middle management is an area that's always going to cost X dollars, so because there's such a gap, and it's the quickest way for businesses to cut costs. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool, and that's what has tended to be the strategy over the years. And there's not too many people that actually
Mhm.
will fall on their sword. So, so you're right, and 9 times out of 10, um, regardless of who gets promoted, there's not a big difference between the ones that didn't. So
Yeah.
I can understand people having a bit of a gripe because they see Joe climbing through the ranks and Fred didn't, or you didn't, and that's always the tricky bit. And it depends on what the organisation wants. So in some places I was pretty outspoken, in some places I wasn't, and it's just a matter of what the balance and reading of the room is at the time. And I think that's the hard
Mhm.
part in life. That's probably the hardest part is is that. And some things people are good at, like they can write reports and they can make it really easy to understand um, in layman terms in a one pager. Some people don't have that skill set. Some people are conversationalists. I'm more of a sit down, have a chat person um, than
Mhm.
write reports. If I sit down write reports, I'll go into
Yep.
detail.
Yep.
Some places don't want the detail; they just want the one pager. So I think the
Yep.
dynamic is
Mhm.
that's where it sits, and some of it is just pot luck, quite frankly.
Yep.
Um, you
Exactly.
know,
Yep.
and I walked into jobs, and I did the job well, but I got into a few jobs in the early days because I knew the people. So there's a bit of that that
Mhm.
goes
Mhm.
that happens by default because it's still the story of safety in numbers um, there. But at the end of the day, I think you've got to look at over the length of your life, regardless of the promotions, the money, are you satisfied? And that's what you've got to look at. Are you satisfied? So I've had 5 kids, married for 30 odd years, um, traveled across many countries, with and without family, and now
Hmm.
I reach a window where I'm at the next pivot. So, am I satisfied with what I've learned and achieved? The answer is yes. Would I have liked to
Hmm.
be up at the level of potentially running all the organisations I'd worked for? Yeah, I'd love to have had a crack at that. Whether would have been successful or not,
Hmm.
you don't know until you do it.
But that's very demanding too, yeah. So
Yes.
I think it just drains you. Do you think? Because
Oh
you have to
yeah.
be available 24/7. There are
Yeah.
always escalations.
Mm,
I don't know, PR
absolutely.
attacks. Like if you're faced for
Yeah.
a company, it's not
Yeah.
just internal; it's also external. And there's like attacks, like legal. I don't
Mm,
know. I
yeah.
know a person who was a CEO for like a bunch of companies, and he was even like cautious about like um he never like shared his address even with the company. It was always like a mailbox,
Mm,
because like he didn't want any of the employees to know because he sacked a lot of people, and they would be angry directly
yeah.
at him, like you don't want them to know where you live, like
Mm,
down to this even.
yeah.
um so it's
Yeah.
it's it's not a joke.
No. 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 And I wouldn't want that. Right. If the job entailed
Yeah.
that, then it's not a job I would want. And
Yeah.
in that space, because I'm a pretty firm believer that if your organization is laying people off, then there's a problem. To the answer is to
Mhm.
why. All right, and that's what those organizations have to address at the end of the day is why.
Yeah.
Because if you've got CEOs that are too scared to give out their addresses, then there's a bigger issue that has to be looked at. Um, and when I was like in my late 20s, early 30s in particular, I was very black and white in my answers and thoughts.
Mhm.
And even at times,
Yes.
if I look at it, probably even into knocking on the door of the 40s, then and sometimes you just need someone to tap you on your shoulder and tell you to pull your head in. That's as simple as that. And I was lucky that I had people around me that would do that. But sometimes your
And
communication.
and do what? Like, can you share an example?
Sure, sure. So, so because I would be tend to be a bit outspoken, protective of others around me, I would pipe up in front of the whole organisation and say, well, I think it's wrong, and you know
Mm.
we
Yeah.
shouldn't have
Get
to do.
yourself in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Whether it's in writing
Yeah.
or
Wow.
um, and it always came with good intentions, but that definitely at times probably cost me promotions, I suspect. But I was
Yeah.
comfortable and in that space because I know whether I sat down one on one or sat down and said it out loud, it just wouldn't sit with me that I haven't done everything possible to push it as far as I can.
Yeah.
And it's not about it
Yeah.
has to be a decision and that's it, because in the end the
Yeah.
decision was made, um, and I had to put up with it, which I did and moved on. But
But you say somebody tap you on the shoulder and
mm,
kind of gave you new direction. So like, was it an eye-opening experience when you just realized that everything is not that black and white actually, because
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
wise person telling me, and maybe I should listen this time. Was it that?
absolutely. And I actually listened and also looked at um, change in my communication style as well. So I looked at that. I took it on board because my communication style at times was pretty blunt and direct, and didn't really
Hmm.
care who it was it went to.
Yeah.
All right. So I pulled that into line a bit, and I also looked at the way that I did communicate, um, and realised that everything isn't as black and white. There's a lot of grey and colour in communications, and you just have to. And I actually
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
also
Yeah.
looked at more books and more ways to self help. So I've been doing that probably the last 20 years, and I think that's probably where
Mm.
you're knocking on the door of 20 years in.
I feel like, yeah,
You're in that
yeah. So
window.
I think I just started. I just
Yeah.
started doing that, and that's exactly. So I'm as I said, I'm halfway through your
Yes. Yeah.
journey because
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So I think for the last like couple of decades, I think especially maybe because in IT, being a software developer, we are
Yeah.
always all zero one, black and white,
Mm,
everything
mm,
logical, and
right.
I have this notion that, or presumption, yeah, that if you really know that this is the fact, then you should be able to say it to anyone, and it just there is a virtue in just
Mm,
pronouncing what you think is right, like seeking like absolute truth and stuff like that, right? But
yes.
now I'm starting to realize there's a lot other the setting matters,
Yes.
where you are saying, to whom you are saying, how it will be perceived, and does it really matter to that person? It could be matter to you, but to
Mm,
your boss, let's say, none of this matters. Like boss
mm,
is looking like for totally different answers from you, or different information, different like um um yeah, different messaging, right?
yep.
And then I'm starting to kind of adjust myself, yeah, and that's probably what you went through,
Mm,
and yeah, I can really resonate with that.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm in another organization I'm working on now, another startup, Cyborium, and the gentleman that's the CEO there, he's 30. So and he's a
Yeah.
very smart guy, very sales driven, and very ambitious,
Yep.
which I think he'll do very well. So he's going to go through that learning cycle um, over the next 10, 20 years, as well as he develops and grows and through that cycle. So, and I think
Yeah.
it's actually a good mix for me personally because I'm more project side, operations, delivery, implementation, with some business development,
Mm-hmm.
but not what I would call, you know, one-on-one head sales representative type
Hmm.
angle and discussions. Because
Hmm.
I don't think that way. I think more business than straight up one transactional sale to then develop the relationship,
Yeah.
right? So that's a different mindset
Let's
again.
talk. Yeah.
Mm,
Let's talk. Let's talk.
mm,
Let's shift gears and actually start talking about what you
yeah,
do, and like what
yeah.
would be your ideal next job.
So my ideal next is to um, continue to build companies, build people, so they can then grow and develop and be guided and mentored. That's what I enjoy now, and I think it comes to a stage where
Mhm.
it's not so much about me doing everything anymore, um, and it's not so much about me being right and you being wrong anymore. That
Yep.
you grow through that over time, and you see more in encouraging people to grow. Like even with the work we did at Job Search Ninja, right? We've had a number of project
Hmm.
managers, scrum masters, developers, coders, all that have worked in that organization and helped build
Yep.
something pretty cool from the bottom up. And it was all about, for me, it was all about, okay, how do we get uh, keep the ship on track, make sure we deliver what we can, and we've got people that are pure
Hmm.
volunteers. So that was a
Yeah.
massive eye opener for me,
These were
um,
the times.
doing that right, um, and
Yep.
because the simple fact we had people all over the world, and there's people there that I would still
Yep.
consider, as friends in that group, right?
Yeah.
Because I think if you pinged them
That's right.
and you had an opportunity that could help them, or vice versa, um, they would listen and hear you out. And it hasn't didn't
Yeah,
do.
and I think that's, yeah.
Mm,
I think there is something binding, right? When you live through any project in any organization, just when you are
mm,
working together on something, like spending brain cycles, and like even if it's mental, like you're not working in the mine or something, right? But
mm,
you are still like you're challenged with something. You're
Yeah,
spending your time trying to work out and listen to other person's objections or
yep,
support or whatever, and then you do inevitably kind of become, and maybe with some people you don't become it because like they move
mm,
on, like you have a
yep,
clash, and then you forget about each other and they disappear. But those who kind of stay in your memory, stay in your connections, later on, maybe if you would be willing to hire them, have them on your team because you already know them, they're proven. It's almost like you've been to the army, you went to that
yeah,
mission, and you
yep,
can trust those people, or you went to the mountains, let's say, yeah,
that's
where like
right.
climbers go, like
Mm,
tied with the ropes to each other. So, and they like, can you trust that guy? Did you actually like sacrifice himself or like risk his life to save you?
yeah,
Um, so there's
absolutely.
definitely something to it. So are you okay? So because partly I'm doing this podcast to
Yep,
advertise you, obviously,
yep,
to
mm,
explain you to the potential employers
yeah, yeah,
or hiring managers or HR.
mm,
So you're looking for like a l- three, like, is it level three? Is like VP level? So
yeah,
is it
yeah,
like
yeah. So for
line
me, it's
workers and then
yeah,
managers and then manager of managers?
yeah, it's definitely managers that I look
Hmm.
in these days. I enjoy in the areas of project management, executive project management, operations
Hmm.
is always fun in that side of it. And I think where some of the direction may end up being is it's a matter of what in the organisations they want people to help manage and coach people. So it's definitely at those level
Hmm.
at the level because that would
Which
then help.
which which type of organization? Like, are you fast about the industry, or you don't really care? It
No,
could be anything.
industry doesn't matter anymore. So the industry
Yeah.
isn't the big uh, issue or preference. It's more about areas that you can actually help people and help the business grow, develop in their direction. So it's looking at those sorts of things. As far as skills are concerned, the natural skills will still be in play. Management of people, project
Yep.
management of deliverables. It doesn't matter too
Hmm.
much where where you work. I believe in those in that. And I think things like job search has proven that in that space. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be in the office, it doesn't have to be all at home. And so for me, it's a
Yeah.
matter of how you can fit in that flexibility, how you can even come in, coach or consult. And it depends on what the organizations have out there available. It doesn't even have to be 5 days a
Yeah.
week. For me. These days,
Sure.
it's more about
What
how can
about
value. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk a bit about project management. Yeah,
Mm.
because I know your style, obviously. Yeah, but what
Yep.
do you think? Maybe you can explain a bit, talk to it. What's the most important thing in project management? Like, let me put it this way: process or people?
Well, I always look at people first, and then process
Hmm.
comes into
Hmm.
play. But I think the bigger one then what comes in is understanding your expectations from the stakeholders. So making sure the
Yep.
stakeholders um, are involved, but you have a clear understanding of what their expected deliverables and outcomes are. Right? It'll always come into
What if
play.
they don't want to be involved? Have you had stakeholders? And I did. That's why I'm
Yep.
asking. What if
Yep.
they just don't want to be involved? They don't have time. They don't care. They think
And
you will fix everything, and then they can blame it on you if it fails.
yeah, yeah. And that's always your risk, no doubts with projects. So you've got to be able to inform them enough to say, okay, we're going to do this or follow this process, and we're going to have these outcomes. And whether it's verbally or whether it's written, that's what you're going to judge with those stakeholders. And some stakeholders, you're going to have to put it in writing and document it and say, okay, you can see our
Mhm.
requirements, you can see what our expected deliverables and costs and timelines are, and make sure they sign off. in some form.
Yeah.
And if
Would you ever kind of escalate to the stakeholders' head? You know, like would you go over their head if they are not performing or if they are not vested enough in the success? Would you go over their head to their boss?
I think you can deliver enough communication without going over their head to make sure their
Hmm.
peers are leaning on them, right? So,
Yep.
for example, if you've got your boss and your boss is the number one stakeholder, all right, and if you don't deliver the project at the end of the day, then one, he's going to look bad, which you don't want. You always want your boss to look good, and everyone's got a boss, whether they like it or not. So at
Yep.
home, or so you deliver that to make him or her look as good as possible. You keep the communications open, even if it's just 2-minute chats to say, okay, these are the roadblocks. Can you assist? Um, everything's on track, or everything's under budget, or on budget, or you're going to go over your budgets, and you've then got to work that out. And this is the hardest bit, I think, of the projects in that space, because then you've got to work out, well, what is this person's best communication style? And we've all got our own style in the way they do it. Are they,
Hmm.
you work out, are they just a sit down, have a chat person? Are they um, big picture? Are they quick wins type people? And then from there, you've got to work it out. Some places are quick wins, some places are big picture. And if you're a big picture person like I am, and you want quick wins, they want quick wins, then you've got to address that really, really early. So when you got to address it when you
Hmm.
take the project on, right? And I think that's probably
Yeah.
one of the learnings I've had over the years. Sometimes I've got it right, sometimes I've got it wrong. And then you got to know um, uh, how hard you push. So if
Mm.
you're on the book to deliver a project and you're a consultant contractor, you've got X period of time to deliver that project. So you've got to make sure you've made enough um, communication um, to the right people. And usually there's more than one stakeholder in the game. So then you've got to do it. At the end of the day, if you did have to talk to your boss's boss, you're not talking to your boss's boss in a way that he's going to head down the office and give him a whack. You're you're
Hmm.
more about getting some feedback on your best approach in that space, or you're
Hmm.
talking to colleagues to find the best
So you
approach.
kind of come for advice.
Yes.
So you're not complaining. You just like
Yeah.
coming for advice. Like, look,
Yeah.
this and that, and my boss is doing it this
And,
way. What should I
yeah.
do? This kind of
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah. It's more that approach, and it's not even your boss. Really, you're looking at it in a way, and you're coming from an angle that you're trying to help. You're always coming from the angle you're trying to help, and you still may get it wrong,
Yep.
right? Life, you you
Yep.
you may get it wrong, and it depends on how many runs you've got on the board, how many projects you've delivered, and
Yep.
what their expectations of you are, and are you delivering to that. So, for example, for projects in the early days, I was always very hard on deadline and budget,
Yep.
right? I were my
Yep.
two critical things, because then, as long as I meet the deadline and come in on budget, then very rarely, even if you couldn't get stakeholder involvement, you were going to be okay. If you can't get this, and most projects that are run, if they're run true to PMP or PIMBOK style, you'll have your stakeholder meetings,
Hmm.
and during your stakeholder meetings,
Yep.
that's when and it's not usually one person, because if it's an enterprise level, you're presenting to many, to one to many, so you actually have to update
Yep.
many people. So even if your boss isn't
Did you
involved directly.
actually? Um,
And
did you ever have in those? Because I remember in my project management days, presenting to stakeholders. Sometimes, like I feel like I'm sugarcoating things. Like
yeah,
I'm kind of saying, "Oh, everything is going fine.
yeah,
Everything's like looking
mm,
good," and they also kind of neglecting it, and they're just agreeing with everything, and everything is hunky dory.
yeah, yeah,
But and then I feel like, why am I doing it? Like, why am I?
mm,
But honestly, I'm not almost like I didn't do it on purpose, because you can always the data always can be kind of interpreted different ways,
correct, correct,
and I was
correct.
like interpreting it in a positive way, maybe hoping for the best or whatever, Did you have
Yeah,
these kind of situations, or maybe
yeah.
when you were like sugarcoating it, but then you were pointed out that no, Rob, the things are opposite, and this project is going to the shits. So like, why are you, why are you lying to us? Like, did you have moments like this?
I, I was lucky I didn't get into that situation. Um,
Hmm.
one time our project went pear shaped, budget mainly budget wise, and I had this vendor that kept coming in and saying, "Oh yeah, we'll do it in 2 weeks, and it'll cost this much money." And they deliver 70% in 2 weeks, and it costs 1.5 times the money. And
Hmm.
so I was working with it was a finance
Weeks,
project.
but that's not a project. Look,
Well, I was working.
in 2 weeks, did you say?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
We
not a
identified
project,
it
really.
early. It's because we identified it early. It was supposed to be a
No, but
short.
I mean,
Yeah, supposed to be a short
yeah, but
project.
like I wouldn't even consider it a project in a way that like you don't have time to react, adjust, even like 2 weeks is nothing in a
It is
corporate
not
setting.
your if you're working in a timeline where you've got a budget already, and
Hmm.
you know that your project's blowing out because you're keeping a forecast of your budget and
Yeah,
a, a plan of where they're coming in at, and you start to see a pattern. It's going to happen.
and you
You give
update the plan what every day?
fairly at least 2 or 3 days,
You track the
right?
plan every day?
About every
Yeah.
3 days,
Okay.
right? And then
Hmm.
because you have to keep a tight rein on those sorts of projects. It's a less than 90-day project, right? In the end, so within a couple of weeks of the cycle that was delivered, these people are going to go over budget. And so I end up having to go with my boss and also with the financial controller because he was involved as well.
So you're
Up,
transparent about it, yeah?
yeah, up to the CFO and said, "Look, we've got a problem here. We've blown our budget, and um, this
Hmm.
solution is going to keep costing more and more money." And I apologised
Yeah. Yeah.
straight up. I didn't try and deflect or blame anybody else. That was the reality of
Yeah.
it. I know they weren't happy about it, but
Actually,
the
and I
solution.
think I think that's where it becomes tricky, right? Because project managers a lot like or responsible like anyone responsible for task or other people's doing tasks,
Mm,
you always have this. You kind of associate. It's kind of your image gets tied to the
does.
result, the outcome,
Yep.
right? And then
Absolutely.
you kind of feel like you let company down or like you stuffed up, even
Yep.
though it's just objectively how it happened because of many like mistakes, delays, whatever,
Yep.
miscommunication, which is not necessarily something you could have precluded, right?
No,
So,
no, no.
but because, and maybe because that's why maybe I'm not a good fit for this particular job because I feel like it's kind of blame is on me. And then I either sugarcoat it or I kind of blame myself too much and make it overly dramatic and like
Yep.
too
Yep.
apologetic. And then also it sets off people because they would say like it's just like a weak person, so stuff like that. Like, do you think you were kind of mastering it really well in that regard? Like, did you actually like were you able to recover the project and everyone like would be thankful to you for like this
Yeah.
eye-opening message?
Well, we recovered the project. Um, it took a lot longer than first expected, and then but in on the same token, they also cut back their requirements. Um, and it was
Mm.
quite a political project at the same time. and from there we're able to deliver a portion of it. And in the end, what they did is they moved it back into finance themselves, and finance run it themselves and took ownership of it, because what they realised in the end, it wasn't something that IT could fix on a commercial standpoint. It was more internal
Mm.
defined on what they believed their needs were, because in the end,
Yeah. So
it
then,
was.
if I were to play,
Mm,
like, if I like to play devil,
mm,
not devil's advocate, but
yep.
devil. Yeah. So does
Mm,
it mean that? So then, I would still point it at you that you are okay. So let's say you didn't estimate the project correctly if it blown off,
uh,
right? So it's kind
absolutely.
of you as a project manager would be
Mm,
responsible, right?
yep.
And
Yep.
then the fact that, oh, the project couldn't be delivered by IT, it was also overlooked. Again, who is
Mm,
responsible?
correct.
So many things can be blamed on a project manager because he
Oh,
was supposed to communicate and get
yep. Yep.
opinion and make
Yep.
sure that we are
That's
doing
right.
the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you take that blame, or did anyone blame you in that situation?
Oh, I think there was a bit of both. There's no doubts there's a bit of both,
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, what you find, and it's the unfortunate thing of being a leader, is you're going to be in the middle of some bad stuff from time to time. And I think the key bit
Yep.
is you have to own your portion of it. You can't own all of it,
Hmm.
right? Because you're not
Yeah.
all of it, because you don't make all the decisions. The project manager is there really to make sure the process is followed, for one, that the company's
Hmm.
laid out. Um, B, manage the timelines of the people and the scope of the
Hmm.
project, and making sure you're delivering to that uh, request. And then, of course,
Yep.
the budget forecasts you're there to manage and control. What the with
But
that
then the fact that
yeah,
because you mentioned that in the end the finance started delivering the project.
yep,
Does it mean
finance.
that they put you aside?
No, they actually brought in an additional member in their team that skills was around forecasting and managing
Hmm.
the budgets for the organization. And so that
Yeah.
was,
Okay.
so they actually brought in someone within the finance team to manage that. And in the end, he
Yeah.
ended up running the finance team in the end long term. And I actually built a really good relationship with him.
But
And
did you
I
feel
mm,
okay? So you were still on the project, right? You were
yeah,
still project managing it because I'm just trying to understand. Was it like you stuffed up and they just like put you to the side and say, okay, Rob, you can still be there, like do this thing, but listen to the finance person. He will be driving things. Like who was making the decisions
well,
from then on? Was
yeah.
it
So,
that person
so,
or you?
well, the finance team always drove it. So even from day one, the finance team were
Yeah.
the drivers of it, because it was their request, right? So my role was
Ah,
project,
okay. So they
not
were
not
sponsoring the project. Mhm.
yeah. So they were the owners and the sponsors of the project. So they were
Yep.
the ones that had to justify the budget. As a project manager, we
Yep.
still had to own up and say, okay, we've we've reached this stage where this project's now going to cost way more than ever expected. It's you're building
Mm.
and the people that have come in and provided the information
Mm.
on how long it takes and what it would cost have given us really a low bar in that expectation. So therefore, we
Yeah.
were able to reassess the project and say this project's going to be more expensive than we ever thought.
Yeah.
In that meant instead of buying everything, the finance folks just said we just want the finance module, right, and controlled it, and
Yeah.
they used it today. The product's called Cognos, and it's used today still
Mhm.
in their environment.
Oh,
Uh, IBM ended up buying Cognos, and and that's
Mhm.
the direction it all headed. And the other choice was Hyperion, which was also a good solution as well.
Yeah. Do you think now that you're talking about it, I kind of felt, and it also resembled with my previous experience, that project
Mm,
managers sometimes, maybe not all the time, and depends on the organization. Sometimes they just like a bureaucrat or like some kind of like a messenger who just like, okay, you just track risks, you just like tell us when everything goes wrong, but we will make the decision. So like in this case, the finance they were driving it, the decision. Okay, we
yeah.
make the decision. It's not like Rob says, okay, no, we can only deliver this module, so we are doing it this way. Nobody
Mm,
cares. Like they decide because they owe the money. So who owes the money usually is kind of driving things. But then
correct.
it really diminishes project manager to this kind of bureaucrat who just runs around, tracks everything, and writes down notes, and then raises a flag. But even when he's raising a flag, he kind of looks like, yeah, okay, thanks for the message, and then like you can
Well,
you can dismiss.
some
Like we will make a decision
yeah,
now.
yeah. Some projects, it can be that, and some projects, the project management team becomes a little bit of the subject matter expert, depending on what it is. So, and that makes sense.
Yep.
Like, so there's no point, like, if a project manager's an IT background, strong in IT, and you're working on a marketing project, there's no point making the project manager project management and subject matter expert, because unless you're an absolute gun, that makes it really a
Hmm.
really role, because you can't make
Yeah.
those
No,
decisions,
but
right?
I think it's not only. I
Mm,
don't think it's rooted or necessarily depends on just your knowledge or background.
mm,
I think a lot to do is with, as we say, who is the sponsor, who actually owns the money to
mm,
extent, like because they
yep.
have kind of vested interest. They know that the money is limited. A project manager is like kind of he's got all the charts and everything, but he's not making a decision. Yeah, like okay, I'm cutting this project in half, or I allocate another 30% budget on top just to finish it. He's not a decision maker. So
No, no,
I,
no.
I just want to
Right.
ask you,
Yeah.
you probably been in both situations where let's
Mm.
say you as a project manager or the owner, like you have the budget and you can make decisions, or you're a project manager who is just a scribe. Which project management do you like more?
Oh, you naturally like the project where you've got 100% control of everything. They're the fun ones. So there was one where we delivered a switching system for gift cards,
Hmm.
where we fought and got the budget, and all the budget sat under me as far as where the money
Hmm.
went, lines, um, decisions on the technical side would roll up to the project manager. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was a good project,
Yeah.
and that rolled out in
Hmm.
26 countries around the world, still used today. Um, and we
Hmm.
delivered that on under budget, on time.
Yep.
Um, and it's everyone was pretty happy with the solution. So they're definitely the great
You
fun.
have to deliver on, like, yeah, you few times already said on budget, on time. I
Mm,
always write it in my resume,
mm.
but I like it's almost never the case. It's always like you have to either cut the scope in the end, or you have to get some people out of the project to save money, or something. Like, tell me, like, did you make hard decisions on that particular project, or it's just converged magically, like you just like
Well,
burned it
that
down exactly to the zero in the
that
budget on the
yeah,
day of release?
yeah. I mean, that project was one project that just it clicked. We had the right people at the right
Mm.
time and in the right window, and it just
Wow,
clicked. Um, and we didn't
but
have
that's
to
very
work.
rare.
Yeah, it is. That was one of the fluky, rare ones. On time. I've worked on
Hmm.
other projects where we've had to um, cut the scope, definitely, and to deliver and make the choice. Is it budget? Is it
Yeah,
scope, or is it timeline? What's the important?
yeah,
And the trick is when someone
yeah.
comes back to you, oh, they're all important. Well, that's not,
Yeah.
logically thinking um, in that space
Yeah.
because
No,
we.
but then no, but there is wait, but there
Mm,
is another aspect, and some business leaders, sponsors,
mm,
they are aware of it. So this
mm,
is so they understand your okay, yeah, yeah. There is time, there is scope, there is quality that you compromise,
yep,
but also there are people who you can
yep,
make work harder. So when they say to you, and I would be probably as a business leader,
mm,
if I feel like, oh, this team is a bit too relaxed, too agile, you know,
mm.
I would say, sorry, no, all important, and you have to deliver, because that will push you to go and mobilize the people more. Like, were you in this situation before when you had to kind of be rough with people, make them work harder?
Oh, if you've got you push your people right, you can push people pretty hard, right? But you explain the
Hmm.
situation. So you can always push people to the boundaries or ask. But I've never found
Yeah.
that if you get there and scream and shout and um, rant and rave at them, it will
Wait? Can
it
I
will
stop
help.
you? Can I stop you?
Mm,
Because I wanna make sure that, like, I understand if you are talking hypothetically, or you
mm.
actually screamed and shout at people.
Hypothetically, because I've watched it, I don't scream and shout
Okay,
at people.
so you never, because I can't imagine Rob screaming at anyone.
No, no, I don't scream and walk over to someone and scream and shout at people. Never have in that regard.
Yeah.
They might get a pointed email, but
Okay.
they,
What was
uh,
the but on that note, though, like, I really want to kind of understand, where is your, like, bottom line, or where's your barrier? You like, where's your red line that you don't cross? Like, what was the harshest thing you had to say to a person to make the person or the team perform better?
well, but basically we will pull it in, and you'll look at what work we've got in place, what is outstanding to be done, and what is the timeline to deliver it. And if we're 60% through, 70% through the time, but 40% through the deliverables, then I'm coming back on
Yeah.
the angle of, okay, we've got a problem here, folks, and we need to solve
Yeah.
it,
Hmm.
and we need to solve it quickly, and we need to solve it together. Now you can be pretty
So
firm.
this was, yeah. So verbatim, this was kind of the language they would use. Yeah. So it's like more like, again, scientific. Yeah. Hey, I measured everything. Looks like we are running behind. We have a problem. So you just literally use kind of this kind of language, and it
Yes,
worked for people.
yeah, I find that work better for people than getting it watch because I've watched others do it, and it may work once, it may
Okay.
work twice, but it's not going
Two.
to work
Like, can you give an
long.
example? Like, what did you witness? Can you tell me? Like, what was the harshest thing you saw? Like swearing, not beating, obviously, but
I've
firing somebody on the spot. I don't know, like, or
no,
saying, "I will fire you." Like, you
yeah,
will be if you don't get your shit together, you'll be fired. Yeah,
I've
I
been
can
pretty.
make it happen. Did you see
Yeah,
that kind of stuff?
no, I've never, I'm never in the workplace, right? And I've worked in many countries. Had people
Yeah.
run to a room that you're in a meeting and scream and shout and swear and say you're all going to get fired and all that sort of stuff. I never had that. Um, what I've had is that
No, I mean, you've never observed it even. You've never
uh,
observed it. So what
no,
was the harshest thing you observed, which
well,
you think
the
you would never do?
harshest thing is typically you can tell, you can tell the person or um, sponsor is disgruntled, right? You can tell in the
What does
tone.
it mean?
It, well, if you're working in the situation where you're not delivering, then usually most
Yeah.
executives say to you that they're not happy, and they're not happy with the
Yeah.
performance. They're not because it's not coming in on time. They're not happy because you're
But they will
you're
be polite, yeah? They will
right.
politely tell it, yeah, with a
Yeah,
frown, whatever,
yeah,
concern, express
down
concern.
very an assertive tone and direct. right? A more blunt tone in that regard. But they're not going to, they don't run into the room and swear and curse and yell and throw tables and
Yeah.
say you're going to be sacked. And there's more maturity than that. And it usually
Yeah.
comes back to, I don't understand why it's taking so long, right? It's usually that angle. And
Yeah.
usually that's from because you're as you get more higher up in the food chain, you got to remember they're not seeing what happens at the lower level day to day, and you're not seeing what happens at their level day to day, right? So you've got this
Yeah.
big gap in expectations when that happens, and you've got to reset the
Yeah.
expectation. And for a project manager to get totally angry
Hmm.
and throw a bit of a tantrum, at times these days, and it's changed through the generations. When I first started work 40 years ago, you could be a bit more blunt and direct. But as you
Yeah.
as you workforce, right, the generations change, so you can't be, and you've got to be more mature and
Everyone's
grow.
politically correct, and
Correct.
there is a very like a thin line between like harassment, bullying, and
That's
being
right.
just like demanding. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
what I always found in those timelines is once you get to you have to have honest discussions with people, and you work out the
Hmm.
ones you have to do
Yeah.
one on one, ones you have to do as a group, and then you have to, as a project manager, and this is where I think it comes in. Project managers also have to have
Yeah.
strategy, right? If you go through your standard
Hmm.
timelines and approach, and you get through those ones and they just work, great. You're doing a lot right. If you're
Yeah.
in a crunch where the project just hasn't gone so well, and it could be simply because there's just things
Hmm.
that were unknown, or someone was sick,
Yep.
or someone just wasn't up to it, or someone didn't have the skills, then you've got to work out, well, what is my alternatives, right? So one project, the one we delivered on time, the problem we had there, we didn't have a test system, right? So we had to
Hmm.
create a test system. So initially, the initial test systems was we set it all up on someone's laptop, and they tested the system off the
Hmm.
laptop. So that gave us, um, that saved us a lot of time. So as a project manager, you've
Hmm.
got to be looking. I think where it comes into, you ought to be always looking into how can you bring your project in on time, and
Yep.
you've got to set it up front. I'm going to be strong on timelines. I'm going to be strong on budget. And if you pick those two things, then you can bring into line the business analyst that's writing the requirements, covering the scope. So you're controlling all those things up front. Then you've got to stop scope creep. And then if you're tracking that you're not going to meet your deliverables, you have to have those discussions with the sponsor. There's no avoiding that. And sometimes it's not going to be a nice
Yeah, but
conversation.
before you do that, but before you do go to sponsor, do you feel like, oh shit, I need to make people work harder? Because for you, coming back to the
Oh, of
original
course.
question
Yeah,
about project management, for you,
absolutely.
project management is more about people rather
Mm,
than the process.
yeah.
So
So
how do you get
yeah,
most? So would you first try to get the most out of your people uh,
absolutely,
as a last
absolutely.
resort before going to sponsor?
You're always trying to get as much out of your people as possible, and you're trying to encourage them, and you're working with them to work ways to deliver your project on time or early. Never, never, and you actually set what you do. What I always do with a project is I actually have two dates. I have the date that I've been told it has to be delivered by, and the date then
Yep.
is worked out to give yourself some buffer. And you always create some buffer, right? It can be 30 days, 1 day, 10,
Yeah. So
right?
yeah. So and it's
Create your,
always was it across your entire project management experience that you would have two different dates? That one the actual and the other one much more forward in time for the people so they don't relax. Do you use this technique?
Yeah, always, particularly in corporate sector, I would,
Always.
if the date
Yeah.
came to me, my boss or the sponsor, that it's the 10th of December, I wouldn't be going back and saying, we've got to deliver this by the 10th of December, right?
Yeah.
I'd be trying to pull it to the 10th of November as much as I can.
Yeah.
And then you're going to run
Yeah.
and either you run a bit late or a week or two over, it doesn't matter. But you never,
Yeah.
you never tell the team the date that's come from the sponsor, and you ask the sponsor not to release that date, right? Because you
Isn't
go to
it a
the,
bit dishonest? Is it a bit dishonest?
oh, it's you can call it dishonest or you can call it standard strategy to make sure, because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, the whole team is measured on if they're on time or not.
Yeah.
And if the whole team comes in early, then then um, then they're going to be happy and relaxed. Then you actually have a chance to negotiate a few days off for that team, right? So then
Yeah.
you actually gives you some room to go back in and say, is there any chance of bonuses? Is there any chance of time off? Is
Mhm.
there an opportunity to throw a party? Is there something you can then do for that team, right? Because they've
Yeah.
delivered the project on time, right?
Yeah.
So then you get to
Yeah.
repay them for coming in on time. Now, you also always have to make, over time you do it a lot, then they're going to call you out on it. But you don't you
Yeah.
always have some buffer. It's a matter of whether it's going to be a week or a month, but you always have some buffer. Because if you don't have buffer,
Yeah.
you're in
I'd
trouble.
say it's a percentage. Yeah. It's probably
Yeah,
percentage of the project, maybe 10%
yeah,
buffer in terms
then
of timeline.
yeah. And you're always negotiating with the sponsor the longest timeline. So you're doing it with the sponsor. So if your teams come back and said we can deliver this by the 20th of November, I'm not going to go to the sponsor and say it'll be done by the 20th of November.
So you lie both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm driving it both ways. Building in buffers. I'm building in buffers both ways. You want the team to
Yeah.
succeed.
Yeah.
You want
But
you
then,
want
but
the
then,
sponsor.
but then, I get it. I get it. But then, would it? Do you sometimes feel like you tricked yourself because your team knows that he's not serious. He added the buffer anyway to the sponsor, even though they don't know, but they
Hmm.
know that everyone the project manager does. Sponsor in his turn also knows that I know Rob. Oh, I know his project manager. He probably added enough fat into it, so the team will be fine. So I don't believe his timelines when he tells me that we can't deliver the scope. He's just bluffing. Like, do you feel like sometimes like they understand the game you're playing and then like it kind of stuffs it up for you?
No, because they're doing the same. They're doing the same. They're not
Also,
going. They're not going to their boss. And remember, the higher you get up in an organisation, you want padding too, right? Because at the end of the day, because I'm working with people that are either the head of the department or head of a division in most cases, and they don't want to go to their boss and say, okay, it's going to be delivered by the 10th of November, and it comes in
hmm
at the
hmm
30th of November, right? So they're going to add padding in as well, and they'll add padding in the budget,
yeah, yeah, I get it.
right? And
I
they're
get
not
it.
going to not going to
But the,
go out
and then
time.
I know. So then Disaster happens when the CEO goes all the way down and starts walking the floor, probably like Elon Musk does, in
Yep,
his
yep,
factory. Starts sleeping in the
yep.
factory, and then he understands that people doing nothing because there was so much padding on all the layers at it. and then he slashes all of this padding, and then the whole organization starts working like much more effectively. Do you think? Like, is this hypothetically what's going on? Why those companies, Elon Musk's companies, are twice as more efficient as all the others?
Well, then
Because he slashed all of those paddings.
yeah, yeah. So if the executives want to play that game like Elon Musk, then that's the company's decision, right? So therefore the padding gets slashed. So therefore, if you're late,
Yep.
right? If you're early, you're early. But at the end of the day, then what is
And
he
then you have
going
to
to do?
stay late, and then you have to stay late and work the weekend, or
Yeah.
work instead of 8 hours,
Right.
10, whatever. Because, sorry, there is no padding. Who
That's
told you
right.
there was padding? It was a lie. It was a lie that project manager came up with, and now it's gone. I'm a
So
CEO. I'm telling you, there is
yeah,
no other deadline. This is the actual deadline, so we have to
yeah.
deliver it. And maybe
Hmm.
that's how the real like business success starts. What do you think?
I think there's both ways. As long as the acceptance is that if there's padding, you
Hmm.
can't you no padding. You can't expect always your workers to work longer because you keep doing that. Eventually, your workers move on.
I don't know. Like, I really don't know. I've never worked there. I wish I worked at Tesla or SpaceX, but that's what
Yeah.
I heard. They work at 70% market rate,
Mm.
75%. So they earn lower and much longer hours, maybe 1.5 longer hours, and that's why they already have reusable rockets, and they're catching freaking the heaviest object flying with the chopsticks arms,
Yeah.
right?
So,
And
so
nobody else does it. Yeah, there is some magic, and I'm not sure if it's in project management because it feels like to me, after the years of project management, it feels like we kind of worked it out in our laboratory, in our project management laboratory, and we kind of good at measuring everything. But there is no rigor, there is no passion in it. It's all just very scientific, very like lab like, and you think you know everything. And then all projects run late and all projects go over budget. And it's only these kind of like examples like gem companies, which are very, very rare, that made it. And I'm not sure if Elon Musk made it because he hired most brilliant project managers and they just did enough padding and not too much. It feels like, I don't know. To me, as an outsider, again, I don't know. I've never read about
yeah,
it, but I know
yeah,
that
yeah.
those kind of
Yep,
people, like Steve
yep.
Jobs, Elon Musk, they just fire people on the spot. They just like they feel that there is too much padding or too much relaxed uh, behavior, or like everything is fine, and they just fire on the spot. Fire, fire. Get new people, get more motivated people who want to work overtime, sweat and make others sweat. This kind of thing, which is completely against project management, which is against completely against what you were just saying, that we always have this as project manager, we always have this excuse, oh, you can't do it for too long, but he does it for years, for
Mm.
decades, and still doing.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I've worked in environments where I've worked lots of hours. Don't get me wrong there, but it hasn't been because someone's
Yeah,
tapped me on the shoulder and said you have to work long hours. Um, in
yeah,
that
also.
space.
Hmm.
So I haven't had that. In If I want to work the long hours, I'll work the long hours, which I've always done, and it's usually because the work I do, I enjoy doing it, right? So
Yeah,
that's me
yeah, but
personally.
not that, but yeah, yeah, no, no,
Right?
but the point
Mm.
is, not everyone
Yeah,
does, and not everyone does at that particular time, at that particular space.
that-
And maybe that's why you have to let people go if they
yeah.
don't belong there at that particular time.
Oh,
They don't want to overwork. Just let them
yeah.
go and invite those who want, and then that becomes the high performing team. Maybe, I don't know. Like, what's your actually? Do you know that high performing team buzzword that everyone is kind of using these days? Like, how do you believe high performing teams form?
Well, I found, and you can get stuff done in timelines that you don't expect to happen. There's no questions about that. But what it usually comes down to is everybody's heading in the same direction, and it is not individualistic. It's people coming together to work out a common goal and outcome that they want to be a part of. And I would say with SpaceX, man, it'd be really cool to work on some of those projects because you're going to deliver a rocket to wherever, and got involved, and wanting to learn. So the ones that are just straight up in that boat, they'll work whatever hours needs to be worked to get it done. And about 20, 30 years ago, I would be in that bucket, right? We just did what we had to
Yep.
do to get
Yep.
it done, right? And you would figure it out. Whether you had a project plan or not didn't actually matter because you're all on the same boat to reach the same goal and outcome.
Hmm.
And when you've got a group of people doing that, then you're going to find as a project manager, your buffer
Yep.
will shrink. There's no question about that.
Yep.
It will shrink because it's
Yep.
not a necessary need when you're on that target. But you'll always find, I bet you, with Elon Musk's companies, he's a very involved stakeholder,
Yeah.
right? So
He cares.
if you've got people more and more and more involved in all the day to day, and because he
It
can,
energizes the others and makes
right?
others get
Yeah,
involved as well. Follow the
yeah.
example. Yeah.
And so he's leading
Yep.
by
Yep.
example. He's leading by that. People want to follow him. People like it, and I don't think Elon Musk probably needs to go and yell and scream and shout. I think you'll find that,
Not at this stage. Yeah, but I
right?
think I
Mm,
think because he already hired the people who do screaming and shouting on his behalf, maybe. Yeah. But yeah.
absolutely. And
Look,
there's a
I have a
mm,
sorry, I have a
absolutely.
cutoff time now, so maybe like
Oh,
we'll
good.
have to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. But
No
we'll
worries.
and I regret it because I really wanted to touch on another big area, which is agile.
Yep.
We'll probably have to do another episode about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, any
No,
other final words would you like to add to summarize?
yeah. I think this is great. I think I like these sorts of forums that you can have a chat one on one and a conversation, and I think it's a great idea.
Awesome.